Welcome back everyone to Kareem and My Coffee. Thanks for joining me this week. Ever since I was a child, I loved going to different places. I loved wandering neighborhoods into places where I probably shouldn't have been. It always brought joy in my life. I love when I go someplace just wandering off to see what I could find. And I don't always have a structured plan. Coming home, I happened to drive past Lake Onondaga. And just out of pure curiosity, I wanted to see what was there. I didn't know anything about this lake, so I did a little research and I found out that Lake Onondaga actually played a very important role in the history of New York. In today's episode, we're going to learn a little bit more about Lake Onondaga, its geography, its role in history, pre- and post-European settlement. So everyone sit back, grab some popcorn, and let's explore Lake Onondaga. Lake Onondaga is located smack dab in the center of New York State, in Onondaga County. If you look closely at the map, you might actually notice that there are several more neighboring lakes. Those are New York's famous Finger Lakes. Although close in proximity, Lake Onondaga is actually not considered one of the Finger Lakes. When comparing the size and depth of the Finger Lakes in this region, Lake Onondaga pales in comparison. Onondaga spans a great 4.6 miles in length and 1 mile in width, and has a depth of 63 feet, whereas the Finger Lakes can range to about 40 miles in length and can reach depths beyond 600 feet. Even though Onondaga is the runt of the litter, it is still a cherished and sacred place to many Native Americans. In fact, it played an important role in the unification of New York before the settlers. As you all may know, before Europeans arrived, the United States was home to Native Americans, or as we sometimes call them, Indians. And New York was home to many indigenous tribes: Seneca, Oneida, Mohawk, Cayuga, and Onondaga. And even though these nations were relatively close in proximity, the same cannot be said for their relationship. They were in fact constantly at war with one another. Nations, like any time in history, differ in culture, beliefs, laws, and this also applies to these nations of New York. But why are they relevant to Lake Onondaga? Well, it's the birthplace of the Haudenosaunee. Haudenosaunee literally means people of the Longhouse. And this is a confederacy formed together by the Seneca, Oneida, Mohawk, Cayuga, and Onondaga nations. And many of us might know this confederacy by another name, the Iroquois. Now that the 5 nations were united into one confederacy, peace spread throughout the land. Or so you might think, but if you know history, peace doesn't last very long. The settling of French explorers in the Syracuse region during the 17th and 18th century was no accident. With the help of Jesuit missionaries, who were living in the region at that time, the French discovered that Lake Onondaga was rich with salt. However, they were not the only explorers interested in the salt. Who else might be interested, you ask? Why, the British, of course. So eventually, a war broke out between the French and the British, pitting Native Americans against one another, and this was known as the French and Indian War. Now it should be said, this war wasn't fought solely for the salt, there were many other underlying reasons, but the salt might have played a part in it. And based on the rules of war and imperialism, the spoils went to the victor. And who might that be, you ask? Well, the British, of course. Happy with their newly acquired lake, the British waste no time in producing salt. But what happened to the Iroquois? Funny you should ask. Fast forward just a few decades to 1788, just 5 years after the American Revolution, And you'd be shocked to know that the Iroquois gave up this land under the condition that salt be produced for everyone in the area. Now, this was just a small agreement in a treaty known as the Treaty of Fort Stanwix. The Iroquois have relinquished their land. The colonists have begun producing more salt. With the increase of salt production, also came the increase of industrialization. And the more industrialized the Syracuse area became, the more polluted it did too. Imagine being a family of fish relaxing in your home in the Onondaga Lake. Slowly, you begin to see more buildings being erected. More two-legged creatures are arriving, fishing. You think you're safe as long as you stay low to avoid the fishermen. But no, you begin to notice a change in the water. It becomes difficult to breathe. What happened to all the oxygen? You're forced back to the surface. Eventually, you come to the realization that it's time to seek out a new home or perish in this one. This is what happened to some of Lake Onondaga's marine life. Once upon a time, Lake Onondaga abounded with the American eel, Atlantic salmon, and whitefish. However, due to the influx of settlers and a boom in human activity, pollution increased, resulting in the decline of marine life. Two of the main culprits, municipal sewage and wastewater. At one point in history, the city of Syracuse did not have the cleanest track record for waste disposal. And Lake Onondaga was where sewage and wastewater was dumped for decades. Aside from the sewage, there was also high amounts of chemical pollution. One of the pollutants contributing greatly to the contamination was mercury. It was said that 165,000 pounds of mercury was discharged into the lake within the 30-year period. This discharge of mercury would eventually prohibit anyone and everyone from fishing in the lake for almost 30 years. As environmental awareness began to arise, initiatives had been taken to treat and clean the lake. And by the early 90s, Lake Onondaga began to see a repopulation of marine life. And now there were over 60 species of aquatic life living in the lake. From what was once the United States' most polluted lake, Onondaga has been able to successfully recover to a level where fishing is no longer prohibited. Today, Onondaga has been transformed into a place for recreation and tourism. From fishing to biking, Lake Onondaga offers a variety of activities that are enjoyed by family and friends. To many, the lake may appear to be just that, a place for recreation. But Onondaga sets itself apart not by its size, but by its role in history in New York and of the United States. Those of you who are in New York, I hope you learned a little bit more about your state. And those of you who are elsewhere, I hope you learned a little bit more about New York. Guys, thanks so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos to come. And I'll see you guys next week.